Oh, I've been having to work on this thing for 2 days.
All right. Tony, can you hear us? Yep. Okay. We think we have our technology in order, so I'll call to order the special meeting of the Wabasha City Council on Monday, August 16th, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. United States of America, to the republic one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I think it's absolutely worth betting on that we'll actually do a little procedural calling of roll, and I want to make sure we have one council member absent that he may actually be participating on Zoom. So I'll call by name. Falcom.
Here.
Tim.
Here.
Duran here. Woodley. Brian.
Present.
Jeff Sala.
Present.
John Friedmeier.
Here.
All right. And do we have Dean on the phone? No, Dean. Okay, he may still join us. All right, and then we'll begin with introductions on behalf of the Eagle Center. I know there's leadership from the board as well as staff, and we'll probably make some introductions as well. We have our staff attorney and our city administrator, so we'll let Eagle Center representatives go first.
The same protocol, sign in.
You don't have to. I think we're good.
My name is Don Jacoby. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff, Eagle Center Board, and visitor. Right. Okay. I pondered how I should start this today, but what I want to start with is why the Eagle Center? Why is it? And I'm kind of a student of history. I did very well in school in history. I kind of love that because it always gave me perspective of looking back and saying what happened and where were the mistakes made, what can we do? And I've always looked at it that way with anything I've done throughout my career, and found it to help me advance quite well. So I look at the Eagle Center, and I'm going to just give you a little history of how this all came about, why the Eagle Center is here. In 1990, in the 1990s, the state gave some money to Wabasha to look at the Eagle Watch, because at that time they were watching eagles on the front, and said maybe there's something we could do to enhance that business. And some money was spent to check that out. And actually, a building was designed and all to go on the beach park. And someone would say, why the heck would you put it on a beach park? Well, you got to remember, at that time, there was a big mill, power mill, sitting on the riverfront. Oh, beach park didn't work out because then they found out that flooded. And cities. Which had 1.1 or 1.2 million, I'm not exactly sure, but I know it was in that thing. They bought the property. The Fiskers then developed through the economic development group here, they call it, worked with Fiskers, developed the product. They were going to build condos and a hotel. The whole hotel fell through because this didn't pencil out to make any money for what it was going to cost to put it on the roof. Now, at that time, same time now, there was quite a bit of open space on the riverfront. And we were sitting on 500 grant from the state that was going to run out in 2003. And it was made a decision by the economic development group at that time that we needed to do something with that. We talked to the city council, the mayor, and they said, absolutely, let's see what can be done. So we put a design together for Eagle Center, or the economic development group, put a plan together of what could be happened on it. We hired the architect and did all that. Then we hired a consulting firm. And we did, first of all, we did a study. And that study showed that if we built it, they would come. So it said, okay, if everything you say is true and everything that we see, if you build it, the field of dreams, if you build it, they'll come. So then we hired a consultant to come in and help us raise the money and put the project together that we needed. And that project that they put together took and said, okay, we're going to meet with 50 individuals, residents of Waukesha or the surrounding area, and find out whether or not they believe this is feasible, is it something Waukesha wants. Went through those interviews and then also asked them at the same time if they would help us financially if this project was moved forward. Raving reviews said absolutely, if all the things you're telling us are right, we'll build the Eagle Center. Now you got to remember, there was an Eagle Watch organization, but you know who was doing this? It was the Economic Development Committee from the city, not the Eagle Watch Center, because there was really no one on that board at that time. Could handle the project. In fact, in that interview with those 50 people, we were told that they would financially support it, but not unless there was a completely new board put in place for the new organization. Not because they had a problem with the people that were on the board, but they didn't feel there was enough diversity there to really run an operation like we were talking about now. So we asked the Economic Development Committee, asked everybody to resign, which they did. They could reapply if they wanted to and be considered for the next board. And a whole new board with people with marketing experience, with financial experience, those kind of things were put on that new board to satisfy the community people who said, okay, now I'll give you some money. Okay, just so I don't go off tangent here. So you got to remember now, this was all done on speculation by the Economic Development Group here, which eventually became the Waukesha Port. And we built it. And while we were building it, the John Lively, who I have most respect for in this whole community, led everything as far as design, building it, constructing it. He actually did all of the work inside, internally, and put an operational plan in effect, and all of those kind of things that needed to be there. Wrote the contracts and all of those kind of things that were approved. And I know the question came up. why was it put in the contract that the city would be responsible for the maintenance? Let me explain pretty simple why that happened. It was the economic development group that put this all together and said, when we get done, we can't manage it. It's got to be managed by the Eagle Center, which we have now a whole new board to do that. So we walk into them and say, okay, we've done all this work. We built you something that's really going to work. It's yours now to take care of it and make sure you don't come back to us for more money. Well, we said we couldn't quite do that. We had to give them some assurance that if something failed and there was problems with the maintenance on it, we weren't making enough money, that we, the city, would back them up on that. However, if you look in the record books, attached to that document, that contract, is a city resolution that was passed that said, if the Eagle Center has the ability to pay for the maintenance, etc., on the buildings, they would do that. And guess what? There's been no money asked from the city of Waukesha in the 2007 to 21, 14 years to maintain anything at the Eagle Center. It's all been paid for by the Eagle Center. And there is a fund that we started years ago for a capital fund in case there was some issues with it. It's still there. We add to it every month. We've got about $110,000 in it today to make sure that we don't come back to the city for something. Not that it never will, but it's there. So really, sometimes you wait, what's wrong with our predecessors that would write something like that in the contract? It's really made a lot of sense because you gave a board something you built, you designed, and said, it's yours now, you take care of it. But we don't know for sure if it's going to make the budgets, going to make the money, or any of that kind of stuff. So it would have been tough to be a board member if you didn't have a little confidence in a whole lot of things at that time. Now, when it was built, John Mineweaver oversaw all the construction. And then because the city can't ask for money, Jerry Arns and myself were asked to be co-chairs of the capital campaign for the Eagle Center. So we took that upon ourselves, and we had enough money committed before we started construction to fund it. That was pledges over 4 years. But that meant we weren't going to get it all at one time. So the city council right here voted that they would give us $1 million loan, and we used up to $900,000 of that. But it was all paid back to the city, and it was paid back to them with an extra 1% over what they would have gotten in the CD at the bank. I think if I can remember, it was like about $33,000 extra dollars that the city received out of that. But they had a confidence that the Eagle Center could do. So, you know, I really struggle a lot of times watching council meetings when we're at odds with each other. When the Eagle Center is at odds with the Port Authority or odds with the city council, because the city built that as an economic development project. The city built it. Now, the city can't get along without the Eagle Center because there's certain things that won't happen if the Eagle Center's there, and the Eagle Center can't get along without the city because there's certain things that have to happen. We're all one. We're one organization that's out there to do one thing, that's to bring people to Waukesha that will help the economy in this area. That's why the state gives us that money. We wouldn't get that money if we didn't build something that was going to do something for the economic development in this area. It's not just for Waukesha, it's for southeastern Minnesota. And we're right back at the same thing now. That's why we're getting $8 million from the state
over the period of years. 4 million to do phase 1, 4 million jumpstart for phase 2. So we're gonna have to raise a lot more money for that. Now, I don't think I need to give you a whole lot of other history other than I would like to talk a little bit about when that open space has been on the agenda dozens of times. It's been talked about. It's been, what do we build there? I've been there, you know, I know all about this because I was on the Economic Development Committee in 2002. And I don't know how many years, I spent about 9 or 10 years. And then I've been on the Eagle Center, worked for the Eagle Center, and I didn't go on the Eagle Center until I came off of that. And I've been on the Eagle Center since about 14. So I am quite familiar with everything that has transpired over these years. And we had lots of conversation with City Hall, the Port Authority, about how we could expand the Eagle Center. About 6 years ago, 7 years ago, we started talking about that because we had the Preston Cook collection coming. And at one time we had proposed that we would add an addition under the Eagle Center. And then we had a proposal from another hotel that was going to be built there, would be accommodate the Eagle Center. That didn't make it because it didn't really pencil out for that group. We had another hotel come through saying that they would do that. They would build a hotel down there. They'll blame the city for not ever doing that, but I know that didn't pencil out for them too. But what came out of that was the people in Wabash, the residents of this city and the surrounding community really stood up at that time and said, we don't want anything on that old spot down there. We want that continued to be open, and we want to develop that into something park-like, you name it. But we need to keep that. And that came from the residents in Wabash. So that's it to the Eagle Center. There's no land available there. What are you going to do? And a lot of conversation went on. It wasn't openly public, but there was a lot of conversation behind the scenes, because if you open up and said you're going to buy some buildings on Main Street, price would go up tomorrow. So we went about that. We bought 4 buildings. Now we get a lot of criticism that 4 buildings were bought on Main Street. We took them off the tax rolls, which we did. But why did we do that? If you looked at that time, if you looked at those 4 buildings, X-Grad's building, Pete was saying, hey, I'm going to retire. The title company upstairs is going to go away. I really don't know if I sell this as my business, you know, but yeah, my building's for sale, and I don't want to do a lot of maintenance now. Just next building over was the same. Bill didn't need it any longer because they were building a new one across there, redoing the one across the street. And he said, yeah, this sounds good to me. There's nothing in there, just built. The next building was Abbott's. There's nothing in there. What was in Abbott's? One little flower shop in there that never was open. I don't know what she was doing with it, but she was from over by Northfield, and she would come in and she'd work in there a little bit. But I think I did buy something in there one time because it was open. But just so Abby said, okay, no, I can tell. We talked to Sonny's Carpet. Sonny's Carpet said, oh God, you're godsend. My health is failing. I'm be more than willing to sell my building because I want to get out of here. I want to go to something smaller. I want to set up a business because I want my guy that works for me to take it over someday. And I don't need this. So he found another building, moved it over there. And then eventually when Sonny died, he was moved out of that, you know. So we had 4 buildings right there that didn't really do a lot for the city of Wabash. The outsides were deteriorating. We spent money. replacing bricks and those kind of things on those buildings that we own. I don't know if you know that the whole back end fell off, one or two of them during a big snowstorm here 2 or 3 years ago. Got those things. But when you look at the back of those buildings, they don't look very nice today. And there's a lot of work that has to be done on them to bring them back to being what they need to be like, front side and back side. So I took a look at what the taxes we took off the road. I knew what they were at that time. We own 5 buildings down there. I worked with the tax assessor, not tax assessor, county auditor over here a couple weeks ago. And I said, if you give me some numbers and some figures, and we went through the whole thing, and we came down to how much money in taxes the people that really support the city of Waukesha, how much they pay. And that's both city, state, and county. County, schools, and city, those 3 taxes. Did some calculations. And yes, people are paying a little more on their taxes because we bought took those 4 buildings off the tax rate. And how much? A person paying $3,000 tax today, the way I figured it is $7.50. That's what it costs her to do what we're talking about, over a $27 million asset improvement for the city of Waukesha. Now, I cringe when I hear those things at a council meeting, because you can't run us down, and we won't run you down because you're our representatives. And I understand, and they'll talk to you about this, but you got to tell them that that's $7.50 on a $3,000 tax bill. Would you continue to pay that? Now it's going to inflate up next year. I suppose it'll go 5%. 5% hits them, and do a little more. I talked to someone who's paying $10,000 taxes, and I told him that it's costing them $25 to $30 more a year. He said, I don't care if it costs $500. Build it. But we've got to get rid of being adversarial. It's a project for the city and the Eagle Center, and it really works. And I'm going to turn over the mic right now to Meg, our new CEO, who I just can't tell you how proud we are to have found someone like that to come to this city and work on the project that we're on now and manage the youth. She's just a blessing to have her here. So Meg, would you please take over?
Thank you, Don.
I'm not going to take too much time because I know you have this is a work session and you have work to do. Don asked me after he did his history, so everybody understood. And hopefully, you've heard me say enough times, this is a partnership. I wouldn't have come to Waukesha if I didn't come from a small town. I believe in small towns, I believe in communities, and I believe that even small towns have to grow, evolve, and change, because if you don't do that, you're going to fall back, you're going to fail. And the town I came from is not moved forward. Even though I grew up there, I love that town, my brother still lives there, but they didn't make partnerships like neighbors around us did. And it's because they didn't build partnerships. So I'm a firm believer in that, and I said it, and I mean it. Don asked me to talk a little bit about the economic impact of this, because that's what the Eagle Center is. You know, it's a mission of love for me, because I love Eagles. I love the business that we're in. I love museums, education. I love taking care of these incredible creatures. But it's also a business. And that's one of the things that Randy, our chair, always talks about. The Eagle Center is a business. Yes, we're a nonprofit organization. We're true to that. We abide by all its rules, but we are a business and we are an economic driver. So multiple studies have been done. 2014 was the first one when we went down this path. it was found that $34 a person was spent in this community for people that came to the center during the SOAR event. Groups of three, 132 per visitor that came from beyond 25 miles was sent, came into this community, stayed in hotels, and 85% of them were likely to go to a local eatery, 50% were going to shop. That's been happening consistently since well before 2014, and it's just continued to grow up year after year. Unfortunately, we couldn't do SOAR last year. We had to stop because of COVID. But the first weekend of COVID, we had the first weekend of SOAR, the beginning of COVID, we had our biggest attendance ever. We had 1,800 people come in a day and a half. So we know that money is coming into the community. When you compare external out-of-town guests, it's more than 25 times the amount is spent by an out-of-town guest in this community than by local visitors. I can also tell you that when we looked at the studies over time, I went back to the 2016 figures and have updated them, and what was presented to the state in this bonding request, again, $8 million doesn't come into this community for general purposes. It will come to this community when we can leverage additional millions of dollars to make this project happen. So $8 million wasn't just given to the community, it was given as a partnership in the project between the city and the community to grow, to present this driver. Right now, if you were looking at what the spend was in 2016 when this was first started, it's over $5 million in value that comes back to this community as a spend. It was estimated in 2016, it was about $3 million. It's now with inflation over $5 million. By the time we get to 125,000 visitors, and I know that's a lot for the community to have to take, to have to deal with parking and have to deal with all those people. So I saw restaurants that would not open during COVID if we were closed. They came to us and said, we are not going to open on the days you're not open because you drive so much more traffic. If we increase to 125,000 visitors, our total Eagle Center spend, plus the total spend outside the Eagle Center, equates to $7 million a year. That's a simple fact, $7 million a year. These are done by economists, they aren't done by me. So that's $8 million in bond funding, $7 million a year in spend to local businesses, and then up to $17 or $18 million more in philanthropy that goes to local contractors, local vendors, as much as we possibly can in construction. That all comes back into the community. I also want to emphasize, this isn't just about the business. I moved to Waukesha. It took me a year and a half to find a place to live. I moved to 4 different places in order to be able to live in this city. I have more than 65% of my staff that live here. We are intending to employ at least 10 more full-time people in the next 5 to 7 years. And that's at least, depending on growth. We all pay taxes. We all use local vendors. The Eagle Center itself uses 50 local vendors plus every year. We pay them for their services. We focus on their services. We have, and we pay taxes. We all pay taxes. Our annual spend in this region is well over $1 million, just us spending the money ourselves. And then when you add to what people come in and spend, we will be well over, as I said, $7.5 million in total spending, closer to 8. And then we'll be spending just by focusing on building our staff, building our infrastructure, $3.5 million to this community every year. You know, economic development is one of those things that it's not tangible like taxes. You don't see the cash. But there's a well-known person, and Don introduced me to him, named Roger Brooks, who is a specialist in economic development. And what he says, there are 3 reasons why tourism is the purest form of economic development. 1, people come, spend money, and go home. You attract the right visitors. You don't have to pay for much more in police and social services. They impact your infrastructure very little, yet they support your retail, your restaurants, your hotels, and they get to know you as a community. Tourism is the front door to non-tourism. Who comes to your home and brings their home there and moves to your community if they don't learn your community first and learn what you have to offer? When I came and interviewed for a job, I didn't know anything about Wabasha. I came, I interviewed, I experienced, and made a decision that this was the right thing to do. And tourism showcases what we have. And the economic impact of that is endless. And seeing the National Eagle Center in this community was quite inspiring to me. I brought a gentleman in, you all know Scott Lean, I believe at this point. The other night at dinner, he brought his UK tech person, who is his distributor throughout Europe and the world from Tech Silver, Miles, to visit the center before he went around the rest of Wabasha. He has us out there on Facebook and social media worldwide because he is so inspired by the fact that this community, because he'd only been to big cities before, this community has this gem and is worldwide in what they're doing. The last thing I'll say is tourism is downtown's best friend. The #1 activity of visitors in the world is shopping and visiting downtown. We want to make the downtown even better than it is. As Don referred to rehabbing buildings, it's the most expensive part of what we're proposing. It's what's going to, our philanthropic dollars are going to go into. The state's not funding most of that. That's what we're raising money for because we want that downtown to be as attractive, engaging, walkable, and supportable for other retail and other activities in the community that local people and visitors alike will want to support. I agree with Don. We can't do this without a partnership. I have a great deal of respect for what you all have made happen historically. And I really hope that we can get these documents moving and done so that we can get this project moving forward and we can do what we all want to do, which is make Wabasha a stronger community. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. Did you have any other comment from other additional board members? I feel like in the spirit of partnership, we should just do a very brief introduction so that people know who they're talking to. And I apologize for this disastrous setup. This does not feel like a workshop even for us. It's just a really difficult room. But maybe we just start with James and you could introduce yourself and maybe where you come from and how long you've been on the board. About. Nobody likes to be quizzed on that. Approximately.
I'm James Reedy. I'm from Winona. I'm professor there in tourism. And I've been in that community since 2000. I was on the board in 2008. I was the chair for 6, 7, 8 years, and then Randy took over. And I'm still on the board today.
John Beatty, I live in Rochester. I'm an attorney at Dunlap and Seeger. My connection to the Eagles Center started probably about the same time Don started talking about it. I've come to the San Prairie, placed there 1992, and then probably been on the board the last 4 years.
Good job. Robin.
I'm Robin Walney, and I'm born and raised here in Wabasha, well, live in Reed's Landing. I'm brand new to the Eagles.
Tony Smith, lived in Wabasha since January of '77. Did a lot of work for the University of Minnesota Extension, did a lot of work in tourism and development, and then worked in St. Paul since 2002, but I'm on the board and on the board for 3 years.
I am Annette Nicholas, moved to town in 1990, built and operated a business for 22 years, the Dairy Queen. Once we sold that, I joined the National Eagle Center team and have been on that team for 8 years, and I'm currently the chief operating officer.
I'm Peter Coyle. Good afternoon. I'm Peter Coyle. I'm a real estate land use lawyer with Clark in the Twin Cities. And we've been advising the board on the bond that they pursued with the state of Minnesota with your assistance, as well as the related documents that are necessary for the expansion.
I'm Randy Eggenberger, I'm board chair, started on the board of the Eagle Center in 2007. I'm a native of Lake City, and I've lived there most of my life. And I owned Wild Plains for a number of years there until I sold it several years ago, and I'm now more or less retired from the Eagle Center.
Doesn't look like it.
You're retired, right?
Yeah.
Eric,
You have general interest and support.
yeah, thanks for being here. Suzanne,
I'm Suzanne Blue. I grew up and live in Medley. I have a small business called Story Beat. We live in the Redwood Area Fund, which has been involved with our Redwood projects. I've been on the board of the Eagle Center for quite a number of years. I don't know how long.
I'm Ross Lexwell. I live in Red Wing. I work for Excel Energy. I cover southeastern Minnesota for the company. I've been on the board for about 3 years, and I have 2 little boys, and that's kind of my first experience with the Eagle Center with Great Good Voices.
thank you. Thank you all for being here. And John, I had the pleasure of serving on the board with all of you except Robin. So when Robin was invited, she said, I think it sounds like a good opportunity. I said, you can't really, I truly miss the involvement that John and I had. It's a distinct pleasure. It gave me a very good working understanding of the operational workings of the organization. And I think that was beneficial for the city. And we just really appreciate you. There's so much work that goes into the organization being what it is, and a lot of it is volunteer on behalf of the board. So thanks for doing all that. And you know who we are. We won't belabor that. We have name tags, et cetera. But I just want to set up for the context of the meeting. We have, when we discussed this need to perhaps workshop this, it was to prevent a lot of ping pong emails back and forth that would not be an efficient way of our attorney advising us on some of the terms of these agreements. Caroline, being very forward thinking, I was on vacation last week, has presented us with the option. We do have a resolution which would have just arrived in your mailbox this afternoon from Wendy. If we were to take action, that wasn't really the intent of this meeting. The intent was really to have a good conversation outside of our very stilted, regular council meetings. We would have opportunity to do that if we need to today to make decision on these agreements. It's a lot of language for all of us to pour through, and I know everybody did their homework. So I'll allow for questions. Some of those questions might be better explained or answered if they aren't a legal question by Eagle Center leadership. So we'll have that opportunity. We have, as I said, a resolution if we choose to act. If we do not choose to act, our next standing council meeting would be the 7th of September. We always meet on the first Tuesdays. I'm conscious of the need for the public to feel that their representatives are making these decisions in clear daylight, which we are, but it's hard sometimes to impress that upon the public. So I like to stick with these big meeting decisions to our standard meetings, but of course, all of our meetings are noticed, including this one. The next opportunity we would have to meet will be our budget workshop, which is August 24th. So with that, and I explained that all to Meg and to Randy, we understand there's urgency, and if there's, some very particular urgency that we need to know about, please always let us know that. But at that, I think yes, Dean.
Resolution.
Yeah, I wonder if we can have that printed out. Is that possible? Certainly, I'm sure. Okay. And I should also state for the record that Dean has joined us. We took roll at the beginning. Thanks, Dean. So we'll get that resolution. That's kind of, and if you need a minute to look it over, I'm not suggesting that we will or will not use that. We have it at our disposal. So with that, yeah, well, maybe, do you want to start with any questions from council, specifically to the agreement terms that questions might be directed at Mike, to Mike first?
I have no question.
Anybody have any questions that weren't already answered? I know Mike's been corresponding with us as we reviewed these.
So we sent these out, we were planning to send them out before the meeting, but we talked about days for this meeting. This was the students' day that we discussed that was going on at work. So we only sent them out 4 or 5 days ago. So obviously, walk us through, I mean, this is a lot of, it's a lot of legalese.
Right.
So I'm hoping that you'll be able to walk us through this in a easy manner that we can.
So
Through all this.
I did draft a memo for the council, kind of describing each document, what it was, what the purpose of it is. I can give you a summary, and it's very difficult, in long documents to distill it down into a summary, but what I would say is, first of all, two things. The documents are all drafted in a way that meet the state bonding requirements. So that can be difficult to do when you have this many agreements. And the unique thing with this project is you've got part of the property that's being improved is going to be owned by the city, and another part is going to be owned by the Eagle Center in fee title. And so that when that decision was made, that created a lot of complexity that wouldn't otherwise existed. So what you have to do is draft all these things together. They don't have to be identical or anything like that, but there's different rules that apply to ground leases and easements, and we're using a ground lease in this case, the whole different set of rules that apply to that versus property that the city owns. So if you want, when you read the document, that may be the answer to a lot of these questions. So you've got to fit the state rules, fit the state guidelines, and you've got to make these documents fit each other and fit together. And that's what's been a little bit challenging. And I would say that part of that is, we're just the attorneys drafting this. It's not just me, it's other terms too. We're not creating the terms. An example of that would be that amphitheater outdoor space use part of it. And that's been rewritten again now, Caroline, and they kind of renegotiated some of those terms. And so it's difficult, I drafted these documents as to what I thought you would want or what was logical. Some of the terms in the agreements have to be there. Tim brought up beforehand that the city, the renewal terms, and he asked, well, does the city have the right to terminate the agreements after the initial term? And they have to have that right. That's
This is 25 years.
right. So, yeah, so the term is set by the useful life, and it's a maximum and a minimum. This is where it gets complicated with that ground lease. So the ground lease has to be at least 125% of useful life, but the use agreements have to be no more than 50% of the useful life of the ground. And then you're allowed to have renewal terms that go beyond that 50%. That those renewal terms have to have a clause that allows the city to not renew it, essentially. They have that unilateral right. If you're going to even use renewal terms, you don't have to. But what we did there was drafted them so that all of the agreements were coextensive, the ground lease and then two use agreements for all. If you add up the renewal terms would equal 63 years, 62 and a half years is what the minimum was needed. The useful life calculation. So if you have a question about that, where does that come from and how does that work? Well, usually the project architect will provide that. And so that came from the Eagle Center because they hired a pre-design firm that did the pre-design using city funds, but they hired a firm that did the pre-design on each unit. So they estimated the useful life. And that's really what MD goes by. You can't just pick a number. You have to have it be set to something based on the construction design. So, and that's, 20 or 25 years is what I expected, and that's what it was. Yeah, so that's basically an overview. So in each agreement, you've got a ground lease, just to walk this, make sure everybody understands. I can walk through this. For the Main Street properties, what I'm calling Main Street properties, that property is going to be owned by the Eagle Center. It will not. Originally, it was going to be transferred, deeded to the city for $1, and we were going to include that in the same legal description as the main premises, and then lease the whole thing back, lease use agreement, the whole thing back to the Eagle Center. So now what we have is that is the setup for the main facility, and the amphitheater outdoor space has been added to that because that's being improved. So that space will be owned by the city, will continue to be owned by the city, and will be leased back to the Eagle Center. Whereas the Main Street properties is going to be owned by the Eagle Center, ground leased to the city, which means that I explained that in the memorandum what ground lease is. Ground lease to the city, and then after we get the ground lease, we're going to turn around and enter into a use maintenance agreement back with them that mirrors the use and lease agreement for the new facility. They don't mirror each other, but they're similar in terms of what their terms are. So that's the structure of what's going on, why it's gotta go on that way. It's allowable to do that. Eagle Center wanted that. They stated they wanted that so that they could take out, leverage that property, basically mortgage it, which they've since done. So there's a mortgage against that property, which created the need for another non-dispersal disturbance agreement. Even though it's not entitled that, it's also a subordination agreement. That's important to know. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit, just in general terms. So anytime you do bonding projects with the state, I'm doing 2 right now. This one was the city one, I'll go. And that one deals with sewer pipes. And so individual sewer pipes are property that we have legal descriptions for. In this one, you're dealing with large parcels that are owned by the city, and then as well as 5 separate parcels owned by the Eagle Center. So when you're dealing with that, the city, the state will always require what's called a real property declaration. What that is a document reported against the city's interest, whatever that interest may be, in terms of the facility, the main facility, I'm calling the main facility, current gym. That's reported against our fee title interest, because we own the properties. There's a recorded document that basically says the city can't sell that property without a consent. And the reason they do that is they want to protect their investment. The state's putting in $8 million into this. They don't want you to be able to turn around and sell it. And they want to have a say in that. So they record this document against anything that you use to improve that they don't grant a waiver for. And the only grant waivers, the only waivers I know about, we tried it, weren't able to get waivers granted for months, and we couldn't get waivers granted. I don't get into that, but basically they grant waivers for things that are in the public right of way. So in other words, if there's a small slice of this project that is in the public right of way on Digital Alley, so you could get a waiver for that, and they wouldn't record a declaration against the public right, dedicated public right of way. So they're going to record a real property declaration against the main facility, and then on Main Street properties, they're going to record a real property declaration with the county reporter against those parcels, but the terms of that document will not affect their ownership. It'll affect our leasehold interest. So what it basically says is we can't terminate that lease without their approval or divest ourselves of that property with this without their approval. Same idea. They want to make sure that whatever public entity is receiving these grant funds, the MMB, Minnesota Management Budget, the agency of the state that handles this, has the right to control that interest, notwithstanding whatever the city or the public entity receiving the funds do. So anyway, so that's, and so when you do these projects, you have the real property declarations, but you also have a lot of technical requirements that deal with federal tax classifications, deal with the declarations themselves, deal with anything that would violate the state constitution, which is the original authority for doing projects like this. And so that's a broad overview. There's all kinds of specific terms that they create a checklist for attorneys like us to use to go through that. And so then beyond those terms, though, then there's a lot of there's a lot of leeway to negotiate the agreements like we would negotiate the other agreement that you might have with another party for a lease. And so one of the council members asked a question about the city's oversight. So one of the kind of benchmark requirements is that the city has to have oversight specifically related to the budget and the operation of the governmental program. They have to have oversight built into these documents. In other words, you can't just hire the Eagle Center and then they're off on their own to do whatever they want to do. You're not allowed to do that because the only reason you're allowed to send money to the Eagle Center is because you have that oversight built into the agreement. It'd be no different than if you hire a company to, like the Youth Hockey Association, to operate your hockey rink. If you've got bond financing for that, you could do that, but then you'd have to have terms in that agreement that would give the city oversight, which you would have anyway. So there's things built into the agreement to accomplish that. But when I drafted this, that's the requirement. And then where the wiggle room comes in is, do you want more oversight? You could have more oversight built in. You have to have a minimum of oversight, but you could have more oversight. And the way I drafted these documents and negotiated the documents was, you know, I'm meeting the state requirements. If there's something in there that you think, for example, with the budgets, if you wanted something more than an annual budget, you could have a, you know, quarterly budget, or a semi-annual budget, or whatever kind of budget you want. But I just assume, you know, Waukegan's a small city here, you know, and you're hiring the Eagle Center to do this for you, to operate this program for you. So it didn't really make any sense. Now, there might be reasons to do that, but they aren't apparent to me, at least at this time. So that's kind of an overview without me rambling more about it. You know, there's a lot in my memo, but you know, is there any questions, maybe not about the terms of the agreement, but just general questions about bonding projects?
So who's responsible for the maintenance? And
They are. So absolutely, that was not in your original agreement, and I read that, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, that's the core, I mean, we want to make them responsible for all the maintenance. And so there's these rules that you can't charge fees, I've already corresponded with you all about that, but that would be an exception, to charge fees up to the point that you're putting in financing, up to the point that the city's financing the project. So for example, a lot of these bonding projects are matching funds. Like the legislature gives $5 million and the local people want to put in $5 million. That's what a matching grant would be. So if they did that and the city was locally bonding for that, you could charge fees up to reimburse yourself for the money that you put into it. Same with maintenance. So if the city were to maintain it, yeah, you could charge the Eagle Center something to use the facility up to the point where you're getting reimbursed for that expense. What's easier and better is just to have them maintain it. Then you don't have to do that, and then they're required to maintain it. And then there's protections built in the agreement about the city having access. So you can get access to inspect it, and you don't have to need access to inspect it anytime. They have to meet the standards to operate the government program, which is keeping the facilities open. You know, they can't shut down the facility. There's exceptions to that.
what about the museum facility maintenance? Is that,
Yeah, that's
that's what you're talking about?
yeah.
So they own the Main Street properties.
Correct,
The city owns the museum facility,
correct.
but Eagle Watch is still responsible for maintenance of the museum facility.
Both, yeah, both, yeah. And so we could do it a different way, but I think this, and that's where there's a long, negotiating these is kind of like, usually would be the city administrator. But we went a long time without a city administrator. They didn't have an executive director for a long time, so basically us making terms up. But that's why that's in there. I mean, that's so that you don't get into complexity of charging them and figuring out formulas and this and that. And also the statement, Mayor told me that historically they have maintained the facility, up until today. You currently have a lease. It says the city's to maintain it, but it's not entirely clear what the city's done, to do that. And I mean, it's old now. It's been like 14, 15 years.
Is this gonna supersede that lease?
Yes. Yes.
What about properties on Main Street? So they own it. Are they taxable?
No, well, that's determined by their tax classification, so they're a nonprofit. So, there's been, that's a whole separate issue, but probably not. I guess I don't know that for sure, probably, I could ask them, But, I mean, and that gets into, are they gonna do something that makes it taxable? And you don't wanna do that, so keep the nonprofit status, and so that's another safeguard that's kind of automatic built in, where you're gonna have, it's a nonprofit. They have to come to
Which language will we use?
Yeah, no, yeah. And that's in the MMP guidance too. We have a lot of guidance documents that discuss that issue.
You'd commented in your memo, Mike, that, the grant agreement is basically standard. There's really not any negotiating on that, but I was a glutton for punishment, so I poured into that, and there's nothing that causes any concern for you. I mean, with anything we should be aware of that?
Well, other than it's not completed yet, that we have to complete the document. No, I mean, I think I want to make sure that we verify the legal descriptions and things like that, and real property declarations that are going to be attached that I just described. we did negotiate on it, so I did take some like, we did negotiate some of the negotiation, but it still means there's still some outstanding. No, generally not.
In the term and options to renew, you're talking about the useful life of National Eagle Center revitalization project, and then you say parties agree to 40, and then in parentheses 50 years.
Yeah.
So it's a 40 or 50.
Yeah, there's some mistakes in the document that we knew, we had to get these out, so.
Just want to make sure you know.
Well, yeah. No, there's probably, I mean, some of that we brought up. Originally it was, we thought it was 40, we just put that as a placeholder, it just needs to keep things, you know.
Yeah, so what the resolution does say is that it authorizes the administrator to make minor or technical changes. So it's completely clean, but any changes that would impact financial contributions to the project would require further action. So we, again, hundreds of pages, we were trying to accommodate kind of a schedule to get the project going. And so I made the decision, let's go with some technical errors that then could be cleaned up, that don't impact the document. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we've already identified, I mean, there's some issues in the documents that aren't necessarily typos, there's ample typos, but there's some agreement problems in the documents that, you know, you've got these long documents now to fit together. There's a few places where the Eagle Center is referred to as not the ground landlord, but they are the ground landlord, and they don't jive with the documents. So I've sent those, basically, we were making comments back and forth a week before this had to go out. We just didn't get time to complete it. So there's issues, and we're gonna address those, obviously.
But it's wordsmithing, it's not,
Yeah, I don't,
terms or statuses.
yeah, we made some significant changes last week, but I don't think there's any more or significant changes.
And you had also outlined in your memo that you're planning to get these documents in front of MMB.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So
Forecast for us what that might look like.
they've been willing to look at the documents, review the documents, basically, and then give comments. If the real reason to do that is if we're meeting their requirements. Otherwise, you could go through the hassle of submitting them, or formally submitting them, and then it takes quite a long time. We can get an informal review fairly quickly. So we're gonna do that, after this meeting tomorrow.
Any other
need
questions?
to approve the documents in order to send them for review.
Not an informal review. But, you know, when you finally, before the mayor for signing, you have to approve them. So whenever that's going to occur, at some point.
Quite a few of these documents have a lot of blanks, you know, as far as the numbers and percentages. I mean, I'm not real comfortable in approving something like that with all these blanks and documents.
And I indicated that. I want the documents finalized, at least the amount of that.
So when do we meet again? Is our next workshop?
We have a budget workshop August 24th, otherwise the regular council meeting being September 7th.
We're gonna try and get it right. We spoke today, we're trying to. I think we have a good chance of that, but I think it might be, you know, it might be a day before, and then we're those. You want to go all 100, yeah.
Any other questions? I mean, we had some issues related to the open space, use of the open space. I think it satisfied what I thought was the spirit of our conversation in a prior council meeting. Is there one other section that had sort of some discussion amongst council? Anyway, I felt like the conversations we've had to date are evident in these documents.
Clarification of the dock facility. It's going to be a floating dock.
It was always.
It was always going to be.
No, it wasn't always going to be a floating
Yeah,
dock,
that
but the second time around, it's going to be a floating dock. So now, what about, is there going to be, I don't know what you call them, a pylon or something for paddle wheelers to tie off on?
That's the intent.
What was Brian's recent update?
I think
talking.
Brian is going to pursue permitting. And I think we are trying to pursue the best possible option for the dockage while being within the budget. So I think that's still being finalized, but doesn't necessarily impact this agreement, which generally describes a dock. And so,
Well, I
You-
think that'll be addressed in the construction documents.
mhm.
So, which you're gonna get a chance to approve when it's left for bid. So, but what the plan is, I don't know.
Okay. So there's gonna be lease agreement, all of these agreements that are listed in
Right,
pendings. And then the construction document.
right. So these lease agreements reference the construction documents, which we don't have yet. So basically, what's happening is you enter into this agreement, the agreement's effective in terms of the agreement. Allow the property to be improved during this term. And then that'll all happen, but the problem with it is the risk issue. So you have to have these documents completed, submitted to the state to get their money. You don't do that, you could start the construction right now. And all the funds are reimbursed. The problem with that is what if the state doesn't approve the grant, they're spending that money for risk. So, yeah, none of that can be done, or not much of it can be done until we get that approved.
May I make a comment?
Please.
The J.E. Dunn, who was the construction manager chosen for this project, they're in the process of finalizing, they finalized schematic design, and they've gotten us to the pre-design numbers that you have in the document. They are prepared to go into construction documents in order to make this a continuous process. But once they create those, then you all have to approve those before they go out for bid, just like Mike said. The intention is to have those done in September. The original intention was to start construction in October. Process of getting all this approved through MOD and the state might take longer than that. But they are continuing down that timeline, so you have the construction documents to approve and review and approve as soon as possible, and hopefully early September.
So you can let the contracts for construction, or you can bid the contracts, but I wouldn't sign the contracts until the bonding funds are. And then you would include the bid specs language, you always include language.
Is that gonna be equal, what's the bid documents?
Yes, with our approval, the city.
Any other questions or comments?
Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with these documents. Looks like it doesn't obligate the city to invest any money in the project. It looks like we'll get $150K back from the pre-design refund on that. The amphitheater and open space access for the public and other community, that looks good to me, and the maintenance repairs on NEC. Looks like, looks pretty good to me.
Anything further from staff?
No, it's been a long journey, and I just want to thank our attorneys. This has been a lot of work, and I've been mainly speaking to Michael, and he's been just doing a good job of listening to what he heard from the meetings and incorporating those with the agreements while I was compromising. So I think Michael's just done a really good job representing us, and I think if we all could rewind it in time, we'd do it differently, but it's everyone's first time, so.
I just want to thank Don for the summary. We've been working on some of this for many, many years, and some of us may be more intimately than others, and we might agree with something or vote on something, and then months go by because of the process, and we forget where we're at. So I think it was really helpful for that, and I think that if we can continue to present some kind of a summary of where we were and where we're at in this process, that'll help us all remember the decisions we made or why we made those decisions going forward. I think that would be helpful. It would help me. So
Thank you.
Would it be helpful if we did a monthly update at council meetings on where?
I would
we're
really
in the
appreciate
process?
that, yeah, I think that.
So much
especially-
transpires, as you
Yeah,
know.
so
You,
much happens. We don't see it all. I think it'd be really helpful.
Okay.
you know, and I take for granted, I guess I see the Eagle Center exactly the way Don hopes one would see the Eagle Center, having come as a new resident and wrapping my head around relocating here. We loved where we lived before. It was it was a shift that didn't need to happen, but we wanted it to happen. And taking a look at a business that didn't rely at all on tourism and still thinking, wow, this community has leveraged all these resources to make this cultural asset. Wow, I mean, what's going on here? And in commenting about that, having family from Lake City that said, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Lake City's a wonderful town and we do great things, but there's something about Wabasha. They just figure stuff out. And that was really important to us. And having a little kid who, was 2.5 and wanted to be a member of the Eagle Center, immediately. And then for her 5th birthday, wanted to take her kindergarten class to the Eagle Center and didn't want any presents, just wanted to give donations to the Eagle Center. I see it that way, not only in so far as its economic impact, which is real, but I see it as a really important emblem of what the community stands for and what it values in itself. And I hope that we see this as more than just a dollars and cents conversation. It's more than just taxes. It's more than just economic development. It's so much more than that. And I've returned recently, and I have to say I was hardly there during COVID. I felt sort of like they're so busy during COVID, they can hardly manage the attendees that they have. We'll just wait till COVID's over. But having come back and seeing high school kids that, are working there, these are our kids. These are our kids that get to work in this internationally recognized institution. So I don't take that for granted at all. And I think we should feel very lucky to be having to look over hundreds of pages of documents about how we make this next chapter happen. That's like the easy part, frankly. These terms, the youngest of us on council will be 100 when some of these terms are up, but I don't think people will say we made the wrong choice. I think that the writing's on the wall that the institution has staying power and has evolved probably beyond your original imagination. Don's got a great imagination, but I would imagine that a lot of what has been accomplished is more than was wished for. So I hope that's what we think 50 years from now. So anyway, I anticipated we probably do need to have some of this, detail filled in. But if Mike's going to press and try to get us those details by the 24th, we'll certainly make that, bisect that meeting so that we can have action if needed. Thank you again for everybody, for all of your involvement. I'm really just so appreciative, and I miss the engagement. I miss being able to answer these kind of detailed questions that people sometimes have, because when you're a member of the board, you really do understand it. And so thanks for doing all that work and representing that interest in the public. Anything else? All right. Very good. We could entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's another motion that anybody wants to make.
Also move to adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion from Tim Ulrich.
Second.
We have a second from John Freemeyer. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you.